Thanks for your company. Well, joining us now, as he does every Tuesday, is the foreign editor of the Australian, Greg Sheridan. What a day to join us, Greg Sheridan. AUKUS Day.
Yeah.
And I've got to say,
absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you started out with a lot of scepticism about AUKUS, but you seem to have changed your tune on it.
Yeah, well, the government, God bless them, took my advice. So when Scott Morrison... I'm glad you registered the irony there, Andrew. So when Scott Morrison announced AUKUS, the announcement was that we would build all the AUKUS subs, all of them, in Adelaide. We'd have a design by 2030 and we'd get the first of them by 2038. Now, I honestly thought I had a much better chance of winning the US Ladies Golf Professional Association Championship than that had of happening on God's green earth. There was no chance of that happening. And I wrote all the way through that even if that process went well, the earliest you could get a submarine out of it was the 2040s. And if we had nothing in the submarine cupboard between now and then, but the 6 Collins class, that was hopeless. And not only that, if you had nothing to show for the program until the 2040s, then, it would be easily blown off course politically. Now, I urged all the way through that we needed an interim fleet of conventional submarines. Now, the Albanese government not only took this advice, but they went one better. They got an interim fleet of nuclear submarines. So what I predicted about the timing of the Adelaide submarines is right. The government now says you'll get your first submarine on that process in the 2040s. But in the meantime, we're going to buy ready-made, off-the-shelf, already existing real physical boats, real physical ships. At least three, and perhaps 5 Virginia-class nuclear submarines. They're going to start there's one visiting. There's an LA-class submarine in Perth right now. The Virginias will be visiting pretty well straight away. They'll start rotating through Perth, which means they'll be semi-based there in 2027, and we'll own our first one in 2032 or 33, and we'll get another one every 3 years after that. Well, that is the quickest, best, most believable way for us to get nuclear submarines that I've ever heard. So hats off to the government for that. That's a very big innovation in this statement.
Well, how does this change Australia's defence place in the world?
Well, if this goes ahead, so first of all, it doesn't help us over the next decade, or it helps us in the sense that the Americans are more involved with this, but it doesn't give us new capability. So the Defence Strategic Review, which comes out in early April, is still absolutely critical. But if this goes ahead, and it's by no means guaranteed, but it's got the best chance of anything we've ever heard going ahead, when we have 8 nuclear submarines, we'll be one of the most powerful navies in the world. There is nothing equivalent to a nuclear submarine. They are the ace predator, the beast of the seas. They can destroy, all through combat. We've seen even inferior old submarines destroy surface fleets. 8 nuclear-powered submarines. The enemy or any potential enemy has no idea where they are. These will have, the Virginias, and then the AUKUS subs will have vertical launch cells as well as torpedo tubes. They'll be able to launch missiles over the horizon. They'll be able to go up and kill you and then run away at very high speed, which a conventional sub couldn't do. They'll be able to mine the harbour of an adversary. They're great sub hunters. They're the best anti-sub machine in the world. And the Chinese have caught the Americans in a number of technologies, but one area that they're at least 15 years behind is in nuclear submarines. So we will have the most powerful naval weapons in the world. Now, that's not the whole of our defence force. That's not even the weight of our defence force, but it is a supreme capability. And as your lead-in said, we'll be one of only 7 nations, unless Brazil gets there as well, to operate this kind of technology. And a lot of the other nations, even France and China and so on, they won't be operating boats anywhere near as good as the Virginias.
Well, tell me about this sub-hunting. Does a situation arise where this Australian vessel sees a Chinese vessel doing some surveillance or whatever and chases it away? Does it work like that? How does it work?
Yeah, it can do that, or it can destroy it. So the subs The Virginia-class submarine is perhaps the most complex artefact which the human race has produced in all its history. So it is incidentally a fantastic thing for Australian manufacturing and everything. I was always in favour of that, but I didn't want to wait 25 years to get a submarine. But submarines are very hard to detect. You do a lot of things to try to detect them with anti-submarine frigates and towed array sonars and helicopters and all the rest of it. But the truth is they're very hard to detect. The best thing for detecting them is another submarine. The sensor array on a Virginia-class submarine is the most sophisticated and extensive and long-ranging in the world. Nothing is more likely to detect an enemy sub than a Virginia sub. Now, you don't necessarily chase it away, but God forbid, everything we do is to avoid conflict. But in the event of conflict, the Virginia simply kills the adversary. It just puts a torpedo through its guts, and that's it.
Just very briefly, they're already talking about defence cuts to pay for this, and that's only in the first 4 years. So what projects can be cut?
Well, eventually, the government's very clear defence spending will have to rise. But we spend $50 billion a year on defence, and it's quite legitimate. So they're going to use the $6 billion over the forward estimates that they were going to use on the French sub towards this, and then it's going to cost them $3 billion on top of that. I think the Defence Strategic Review will also recommend more expenditure, so we're going to have to cut quite a lot of things. But the truth is, there's a lot of rubbish in the defence portfolio. So, Andrew, you'll be astonished to hear me say this. Throw away the tanks. Cut the order for future tanks. Don't spend another dollar on tanks. Give all our existing tanks to Ukraine where they can be used. Cut the order for heavy armour infantry. Heavy armour infantry has no role in the maritime struggles that we face. I mean, I wonder whether we need to build our own satellites. Buying time on American satellites might be good enough. And in the long run, though, the Defence Strategic Review will recommend programs which will commence in the period of forward estimates and which will cost a lot of money subsequently. And the government, the Albanese government, keeps saying it's committed to increasing the defence budget across time. And I think they'll have to do that. But defence wastes so much money, it's got to get rid of all the waste first.
Greg Sheridan, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Andrew.